Who actually killed Joffrey at the Purple Wedding, and what was the plot behind it all? Hi everyone, this is Robert. Welcome to Deep Geek. On this channel we cover A Song of Ice and Fire, The Lord of the Rings and much more. If that sounds good, there's a subscribe button in the bottom right of your screen. The Purple Wedding is one of the most dramatic moments in A Song of Ice and Fire. The King of the Seven Kingdoms murdered at his own wedding feast. It's a bit overshadowed by the Red Wedding, which happens just a couple of weeks before, but the plot and politics are indisputably much more nuanced here. And added to which, we know that the wrong person was accused and found guilty of the murder. The real villain, or villains, have got away with it so far. The first real hints of all this that we get are in Sansa's last chapter in A Clash of Kings. All through that book, she has this slightly odd relationship going on with Sir Dontos, who she saved when Joffrey ordered him killed. He arranges to meet her in the Godswood and basically commits to helping her escape King's Landing. He keeps promising it, but never really shows much progress on that front until the final chapter of that book. Most of that chapter takes place in the throne room of the Red Keep. The Battle of the Blackwater has been won and the victors are receiving their rewards. Sansa watches on as her engagement to Joffrey is called off, and instead Joffrey is engaged to Margaery Tyrell, the eldest daughter of Mace Tyrell. Sansa is delighted. She can see what Joffrey is like and doesn't want to be married to him, but as is often the case in these early Sansa chapters, she doesn't really understand all of what's going on. So she heads off to the Godswood for some quiet and to celebrate, where Sir Dontos meets her again. Suddenly, he has a plan. She will escape on the day of Joffrey's wedding to Margaery. Everyone will be distracted and probably drunk, and he gives her a hairnet. Sansa is confused by this, understandably, but Sir Dontos insists. "You've waited so long. Be patient a while longer. Here, I have something for you." Sir Dontos fumbled in his pouch and drew out a silvery spiderweb, dangling it between his thick fingers. It was a hairnet of fine-spun silver, the strands so thin and delicate the net seemed to weigh no more than a breath of air when Sansa took it in her fingers. Small gems were set wherever two strands crossed, so dark they drank the moonlight. "What stones are these?" "Black amethysts from Ashai, the rarest kind, a deep true purple by daylight." "It's very lovely," Sansa said, thinking, "It's a ship I need, not a net for my hair." "Lovelier than you know, sweet child. It's magic, you see. It's justice you hold. It's vengeance for your father." Dontos leaned close and kissed her again. "It's home." As readers at the time, we're probably as confused as Sansa. Why the hairnet, and why has Sir Dontos suddenly come up with a plan after so long? There is a brief digression here in the next book when the Tyrells reach court. Olenna presses Sansa on what Joffrey is really like, and Sansa tells the truth. Joffrey is well, we all know what Joffrey is. Olenna responds by trying to extract Sansa to Highgarden and marry her into the Tyrells, but she tells Sir Dontos about that and he tells Littlefinger. Yes, Sir Dontos was working for or being manipulated by Littlefinger all this time. This explains why Sir Dontos only announced his plan to Sansa after Littlefinger returned from his diplomatic mission. It was Littlefinger's plan all along, not Sir Dontos's. And Littlefinger tells the Lannisters about what the Tyrells are up to, which in turn leads to Tywin quickly marrying off Sansa to Tyrion. Why this sudden interest in marrying Sansa into the family? Well, at the time, with Ned and Robb dead, Bran and Rickon thought dead, and Arya missing, Sansa was the only Stark left. Marrying her was a canny political move and came with a claim to Winterfell itself. Anyway, Sir Dontos reiterates that the plan to get Sansa out of King's Landing will happen on Joffrey and Margaery's wedding day, and that she must wear the hairnet. Clearly the hairnet is a vitally important part in all this. Remember, Dontos called it justice and vengeance for her father's death. Who ordered her father's death? Joffrey. So justice and vengeance on him. Now let's cut to the wedding itself. We see the crucial events through Tyrion's eyes rather than Sansa's, and Tyrion is rather distracted by finally figuring out that it was Joffrey who hired the cat's paw assassin to try to assassinate Bran all that time ago, and he is steadily getting drunk through the chapter. Nevertheless, our attention is drawn several times to Sansa's hair and the hairnet. Olenna Tyrell even takes the time to adjust it for Sansa at length. "You do look quite exquisite, child," Lady Olenna Tyrell told Sansa when she tottered up to them in a cloth of gold gown that must have weighed more than she did. "The wind has been at your hair, though." The little old woman reached up and fussed at the loose strands, tucking them back into place and straightening Sansa's hairnet. "I was very sorry to hear about your losses," she said as she tugged and fiddled. Then, a few courses of the feast and a few drinks later, Joffrey is poisoned quite suddenly. During the feast, he is drinking from a large chalice. At one point he pours its contents over Tyrion, then it gets dropped on the floor, then everyone is distracted by the admittedly impressive pigeon pie, then Tyrion is ordered to fill the chalice again, but it is too high for him to reach, so he has to clamber onto his chair. Everyone is drunk and everyone is bustling around. Joffrey takes a swig of the wine, then chokes to death. It's very clear he was poisoned, and Tyrion was the person to pour the wine into Joffrey's chalice. He is obviously blamed. The wedding is in uproar, and Sansa makes her way down to the docks, aided by Sir Dontos, who is then killed by Littlefinger. Littlefinger is probably right that he probably wouldn't be able to keep his secrets for long, but still, poor Sir Dontos. At which point Sansa and we are left to try to figure out what just happened, because it all happened very quickly. She notices that one of the jewels of her hairnet has gone, and reaches the sensible conclusion that that somehow contained the poison. She had been set up to smuggle the poison into the wedding feast, so the assassin didn't have to. Sir Dontos clearly thought the whole thing was magic, but he was always drunk and easily led. No, it wasn't him. He was just the person who gave her the hairnet. Sansa then decides that even though Tyrion was angry with Joffrey and would be framed for the murder, it wasn't him. And we know that's true because we saw the whole thing from Tyrion's POV. So, who? She asks Littlefinger, who was clearly involved somehow. Everyone thought he had left for the Vale of Arryn days earlier, but here he was waiting on a boat for Sansa with Sir Dontos clearly working for him, all very suspicious. This is what we read. Peter smiled. "I will wager you that at some point during the evening someone told you that your hairnet was crooked and straightened it for you." Sansa raised her hand to her mouth. "You cannot mean... She wanted to take me to Highgarden, to marry me to her grandson." "The old woman is not boring, I'll grant her that. A fearsome old harridan, and not near as frail as she pretends. When I came to Highgarden to dicker for Marjorie's hand, she let her lord's son bluster, while she asked pointed questions about Joffrey's nature. I praised him to the skies, to be sure, whilst my men spread disturbing tales amongst Lord Tyrell's servants. That is how the game is played." So Littlefinger had gone as envoy to the Tyrells once their alliance with Renly had fallen through with Renly's untimely death. He secured an alliance between the Tyrells and the Lannisters through the engagement of Marjorie to King Joffrey. But Littlefinger, knowing where the true power lay in House Tyrell, sowed the seeds of doubt in Olenna's mind. Did she really want her granddaughter marrying a man like that? Littlefinger added layers to this by suggesting to Mace Tyrell that Loras Tyrell be made a member of the Kingsguard. If Joffrey harmed Marjorie, and he surely would at some point because Joffrey is Joffrey, hot-headed Loras would leap to her aid against the king, and that would cost Loras his life as well as Marjorie's. Olenna could not allow that to happen. The Tyrells wanted Marjorie married to the king, but that king didn't need to be Joffrey. If Joffrey had an accident, it could be Tommen easily enough. This is all from Littlefinger's explanation to Sansa, and we shouldn't necessarily take Littlefinger at his word, but I think we probably can here. He needed a distraction to get Sansa out and would benefit from the inevitable chaos of a king being murdered at his own wedding and the framing of a rival in Tyrion. He even went so far as to hire the dwarves who performed and were mocked at the wedding feast, knowing that Joffrey would love it and that it would anger Tyrion. So Tyrion, drunk and angry now, would be a very, very obvious person to blame. Meanwhile, Olenna didn't want her granddaughter married to Joffrey and probably knew the Tyrells would have more influence if Margaery married the more tractable Tommen. No one would suspect Sansa's hairnet of containing poison, and no one would expect the frail old lady of doing the poisoning when Tyrion was a much more obvious suspect, and Cersei already wanted him dead and would blame him straight away. Of course, both Littlefinger and the Queen of Thorns are subtle and very capable of playing the Game of Thrones in such a bloodthirsty way and letting others take the blame. So, Olenna Tyrell killed Joffrey to protect her granddaughter Margaery, but the whole plot was dreamt up by Littlefinger. This wasn't a rushed thing. It was planned months in advance, and it has all the hallmarks of two of the subtlest players of the Game of Thrones. So far in the story, they've got away with it. But for how long? If you'd like to see more A Song of Ice and Fire videos, please click on the playlist on the left of your screen. Or for my new channel IDG Live, with live streams, short videos, interviews and more, please click on the link in the centre of your screen. Thanks for watching. That's all for this time. I'll see you again soon.